What to do with the auto ISO setting. Basically, don't use it. Selecting auto ISO places your camera in control of how ISO is set and therefore how your exposure is set. Because ISO is part of the exposure triangle, if it's set on auto, then your camera is choosing the exposure, even if you have it set on manual exposure mode. Some photographers love auto ISO. They say it does not matter so much now because the digital sensors and cameras have become so much more capable of higher quality low-light photography. I do not believe this line of thought or teaching and still believe it's best to control your ISO and keep it as low as possible so that you get the best technical quality possible in your photos. On auto ISO, your camera can easily choose to set it too high, resulting in photos with digital noise, flat colors, and tone range. You are able to manage the auto ISO settings in your camera's menu. You can limit the maximum and minimal level that you want auto ISO to use. This may help reduce problems of having an ISO that's too high. If you do choose to use the auto ISO setting, please remember that your camera is still in control of the exposure, even if your exposure mode is set to manual. With your camera set to auto ISO and manual exposure, take a series of photos of a subject outdoors with a strong light behind it. Having the sky in the background will work. Practice changing your aperture and shutter speed settings. Look at your exposure meter. It should continually be reading 0 as you make your adjustments because the ISO is set to auto. Make another series of photos inside where there is less light. Make some with the light from a window as the main light on your subject. Then make some more with the same subject and the window in the background, so backlighting your subject. Take notes on each series of photos you're making. You should see a variation in the exposure of your main subject throughout this challenge. Key points from this lesson are: in my opinion, it's best not to use auto ISO. The camera is in control of exposure when using auto ISO. Stop is an important piece of photography jargon. If you understand what it means, controlling your camera settings will be easier and more effective. Stops are used to measure changes when you adjust your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. A stop is the doubling or halving of the amount of light entering your camera. On most modern cameras, each adjustment of aperture, shutter speed, or ISO is made in increments of 1/3 of a stop. This enables you to be more precise with your exposure settings, but it makes all the numbers harder to remember. You don't need to remember them all, but if you can memorize the traditional numbers which represent each full stop, it will be helpful to you. Take a look at this infographic and download it to your mobile for future reference. Knowing how stops measure the changes to your exposure, you can calculate your exposure as you change the settings. If, for example, you're taking some photos using a wide aperture and a slow shutter speed, and you decide you want more of your photo in focus, you can adjust the aperture to a higher f-stop number. To balance the exposure, when you're using manual mode, you can adjust the shutter speed so that it's slower. Dialing the same number of clicks on your shutter speed dial as you made with your aperture will give you the same exposure. Understanding how stops work will enable you to better guess what a correct exposure will be. Don't worry if you cannot make complete sense of this right now, but do keep this principle in mind when you're setting your exposures. Set your exposure to 1/400th of a second, f11 and ISO to balance so your meter is reading 0, and take a photo. Now adjust your settings to 1/200th of a second, 1 stop slower, f16, 1 stop narrower, and leave your ISO at the same setting, and take another photo. Now halve your ISO setting, making it 1 stop less sensitive. For example, if it was at ISO 400, set it to ISO 200. Then balance your exposure by adjusting your aperture to f8, 1 stop wider than my original choice of f11, and leave your shutter speed at 1/400th of a second. The exposure of each photo should be identical, because each time you adjusted a setting by 1 stop, you made the opposite change with another setting by the same amount. Key points from this lesson are: stops help you better understand exposure settings. Exposure settings are altered in 1/3 stop increments on most cameras. Understanding stops will help you better guess your exposure settings when you need to change them quickly.